10 for Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, 40 for Jesus.
I've got a book called Historical Jesus where I list 12.5 texts, many of them outside the New Testament, in the ancient world for the existence of Jesus.
And the reason they're attacking scientific facts, because they are, is because the scientific facts are pointing more and more to what they don't want to accept, which is that this world has a creator.
What are the sources regarding Christianity? And some of you might be even asking, Nabeel, why should I even believe Jesus is real? Why should I ever even believe that he's a man who existed? The first thing I'm going to start off by telling you is that it is incontrovertible, according to the historical principles of investigation, that a man named Jesus existed in the first century. How do we know this? We have over 40 records of Jesus' life from ancient times, describing this man who is essentially a carpenter in Palestine. He didn't have much of anything. He wasn't a centrally important figure at the time, yet we have 40 sources that refer to him. You know who the emperor was at Jesus' time? Someone shout it out. Tiberius. Good. Tiberius was the emperor of Rome at that time. Now, this is a man who obviously we should have a lot written about. We can expect tons and tons of records about this man, can't we? The historical records contain Tiberius' name by 10 different individuals. That's it. 10 for Tiberius, the emperor of Rome, 40 for Jesus.
So what is, in your mind, the fastest way to disarm a mythicist?
I've got a book called Historical Jesus where I list 12.5 texts, many of them outside the New Testament, in the ancient world for the existence of Jesus. But one probably better example I would use, some say, yeah, but you're a Christian. Okay, Bart Ehrman, an atheist New Testament scholar. Bart Ehrman gives 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus within 100 years. Now, 100 years is actually kind of strict, but it's a nice, narrow parameter for saying Jesus lived. 100, and here's an atheist, 100 years time, 15 different sources evidencing Jesus' death. If he died, he had to have lived. So Bart Ehrman calls that one of the two best evidences we have for that Jesus lived in history. The other one is that Paul is the best New Testament reference we have. Critics talk about half of Paul's epistles, 7 out of 13, being accredited, and you can use them in arguing because they're great sources. Well, the best thing Paul gives us is that he was an eyewitness to the eyewitnesses. Paul, in Galatians 1 and again in Galatians 2, he went to Jerusalem and got to know Peter, James, the brother of Jesus, then in Galatians 2, John. They're all together, and the topic they're discussing, as Paul tells us, is the nature of the gospel, to make sure they're all on the same page. And Paul concludes, yes, they're all on the same page. But here, that's two great sets of data for the existence of Jesus. 15 independent sources for the crucifixion of Jesus, and Paul knowing himself, of course, Peter, James, and John, the big four. He knows all of them, and he can ask whatever questions he wants to about what Jesus looked like when he was walking and talking in Galilee.
You need just too many things? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, you need too many things that are too difficult to explain through only chemical evolution. The leaders in this field, know the details, and the details are exactly what Jim Tour says. It doesn't happen. You don't get long polymers, you get short polymers. You don't get self-replication, you get annealing. You get junk rather than good stuff. That's what they know. And frankly, I think many of them are getting discouraged. It looks like not a lot of progress has been made. Mm-hmm. In fact, very little. And the numbers of problems just keep expanding. I thought there's something missing. And this was how this affected my journey to faith was that it helped break down this absolute certainty that everything is explainable by materialistic science.
Okay. You can see we have excellent reason to believe that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, lived and existed in the first century. So Jesus certainly exists. Okay, what can we know about him? Well, of the scholars that study him, and keep in mind, there is an entire area of historical studies called historical Jesus studies. So we have scholars who've been studying this on all sides. These aren't all Christians by any means. Actually, the most influential ones wouldn't align themselves with Orthodox Christianity. You have people like Paula Fredrickson, Marcus Borg, Bart Ehrman. You have people along these lines who would say, like John Dominic Crossan, who would say that of Jesus, we can know for a fact that he died on the cross. Now keep in mind, that's one of our 3 points that we're proving for Christianity or attempting to show to determine its reliability. Did Jesus die on the cross? The scholars who study his life, regardless of whether they're atheist, Buddhist, agnostic, Hindu, Christian, it doesn't matter. They all conclude that Jesus died on the cross. Now, if I left it there, it would be an appeal to authority, and we're trying to be academically rigorous tonight, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you some of their reasons why they believe Jesus died on the cross, but we're going to keep it brief because scholars are unanimous on this issue.
Once I became a believer and I started thinking, well, God is the creator of the universe, but I also said, not just the universe, he's also the creator of life and the creator of human beings, all of which are not explainable by any other means. So, but how? See, that's my question, because knowing that God did something to me is not enough. I want to know a little more details. I don't know if anyone can ever learn that or understand that, because we don't know how God works, obviously. But I want to keep looking at it, and I want to keep, investigating various hypotheses. I don't think we should stop doing scientific research on the issue, but I think we need to be open, and it may be that biology is at the same place that physics was before Einstein came up with relativity. They were kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. They had solved everything except this nasty thing called light, which nobody could understand. And when Einstein solved light through relativity, it changed physics forever.
Yeah, by the way, it's not just them. Even Muslim scholars will argue that Jesus did die on the cross. How many of you heard of Reza Aslan's book recently, Zealots, that came out this year? A few of you? Reza Aslan's a scholar who has studied the historical Jesus. And as a Muslim, he says, yes, Islam denies Jesus' death on the cross. And I am a Muslim, but I confirm that Jesus' death on the cross is historically certain. In fact, he builds his whole book off the fact that Jesus died on the cross. So even as a Muslim, he says Jesus died on the cross. So why? Why do they say this? Well, because first off, all the evidence that we have, all the records of Jesus' life, which talk about his death, indicate that he did die. If they say anything, it says that he did die on the cross under Pontius Pilate, which is why Paula Fredrickson says, if there's anything we can know about Jesus, anything at all, it's this, that he died on the cross under Pontius Pilate. If you go away from Christian records, you go to Jewish records like Josephus, we can also see in the first century that non-Christians are saying Jesus died on the cross. We go to Gentile scholars, they are also agreeing that Jesus died on the cross. And in fact, we also have some of them saying that these people believe he is risen from the dead. We'll get to that in just a moment. So we have excellent reason to believe Jesus died on the cross because all the records point to that. Plus, if you study the historical process of crucifixion, nobody ever in the entire history of the Roman process of crucifixion, no one ever survived a full Roman crucifixion. So we have excellent reason to believe Jesus died on the cross. Did he rise from the dead? This is an important matter. And lots of historians say we cannot investigate the resurrection because that's not a historical matter. That's a supernatural matter. And you can't study supernatural matters. Well, that's jumping the gun just a bit. If every explanation that is naturalistic falls short and falls very short of explaining what happened, then we have reason to believe that something supernatural may have happened. If there simply is no good explanation, naturalistically speaking, we can use the historical process of investigation to conclude that quite likely maybe something supernatural happened here. So what happened when Jesus died? Shortly after his death, we take a look at what happened, and those historical scholars we've already referred to, in general, agree with three facts that are considered relatively incontrovertible. And I'm giving you what's called the minimal facts argument. If you want to look into this, it's called the minimal facts argument, primarily promoted by a man named Gary Habermas, who's written a book called The Historical Jesus. Also by his protege, Michael Licona, who's written a book called The Case for the Resurrection of Jesus. He wrote it alongside Gary Habermas. He's written that as well. And if you want to look at a very thorough investigation of the historical method on whether or not Jesus died, I suggest you take a look at this book published by Erdman's. Michael Licona is the author. The argument runs as follows. Pretty much every scholar who studies this, at least a vast majority, if not virtually all scholars, conclude three things happened after Jesus died. Well, number one, the first one is that Jesus did die on the cross, which we just looked at. Number two, that the disciples, Jesus' disciples, all believed he had risen from the dead. So, the disciples truly believed that Jesus had risen from the dead, and according to most historical Jesus scholarship, Christianity wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it weren't for that fact. Fact number three. Fact number one was Jesus died on the cross. Fact number two, the disciples truly believed he had risen from the dead. Fact number three, people who were enemies of Jesus, or not his disciples, also believed he had risen from the dead. Now, who are we talking about? We're talking specifically about two people, James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul, or Saul of Tarsus, as it were. James, the brother of Jesus, did not follow Jesus during his lifetime. We see in the book of Mark that Jesus' family comes up and says to people around Jesus that he is out of his mind, basically, that he's crazy, which is what leads Jesus to say, "Who is my mother and brother and sister?" It's those who do the will of God. So Jesus' family is not on his side. It wasn't until after the resurrection, or supposedly the resurrection, when all of a sudden the disciple James the brother of Jesus, James, becomes a leader of the Christian church.
But my prediction is what I see now happening is that atheists are beginning to deny the reality of science. You find atheists saying, no, the universe didn't have a beginning, it's been there forever. No. They say the DNA is not a code, there's no genetic code, it's not a real code. Wrong. And the reason, these are not scientists necessarily, but they're atheists who think they are seeing this from various people. And the reason they're attacking scientific facts, because they are, is because the scientific facts are pointing more and more to what they don't want to accept, which is that this world has a creator. And everything we see is part of the creation, including ourselves. So if you are being told that you have to choose between science and your Christian faith, reject that. Whoever told you that is wrong. It's not true. What's true is Christianity.